Welcome to Flashback, a recap of stories that made headlines during the week. On Monday, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, pledged the support of the World Trade Organization to help Nigeria with capacity building and entrepreneurial products in order to diversify from oil. Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala made this known during a visit to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Abuja as part of a 4-day working visit to the country. She said the WTO will work with other international organizations to help Nigeria solve deficits as it affects infrastructure.
Affairs, we are going to have a session with women entrepreneurs and small and medium enterprises, as well as women business owners. What we want to do is two things. One, a lot of women already run businesses and they want to access export markets. But one of the things that they complain about is the quality of their products and access to marketing, how they can sell. So those two things, the WTO actually has the capacity to be able to assist them. And we've already done something. We've started with women and men who produce shea butter. And we've worked with a cooperative and we've been able to assist them to increase their production, meet the quality requirements to use shea butter for cosmetics.
Our knight in shining armor on that occasion also got the Paris Club creditors to write off most of our debt at that time, which propelled us in a trajectory of growth, and a growth that also saw under her the rebasing of our economy, that also catapulted us to become the largest economy on the continent.
Well, on Tuesday, the United Nations expressed worry about the incessant attacks and kidnapping of school children in parts of the country. This is as the agency seeks $1 billion to fund 214 projects that will help address the plight of vulnerable people, especially children and women in the Northeast.
The United Nations have been at the forefront of helping Nigeria overcome the impact of insecurity, especially in the Northeast, since the insurgency started almost 12 years ago. The UN have been able to do this through funding from partners. Borno, Adamawa and Yobe states combined have an estimated population of about 13.1 million people, out of which 8.7 million are vulnerable, with increasing needs in food, health and other basic amenities. But the target for the 2021 Humanitarian Response Plan is to provide assistance to about 6.4 million vulnerable people in these states. The 2021 Humanitarian Response Plan has now been launched, seeking $1 billion from partners to meet the needs of these vulnerable people. Declining funding still remains a major challenge, needing other forms of strategy.
And I've been clear in my advocacy at all levels that the only solution to the problem in Northeast Nigeria is peace. And I've called on stakeholders at all levels, at the highest level, that we must prioritize prevention, development where feasible, and humanitarian assistance where necessary or when needed.
Gender violence and other issues brought about by these humanitarian issues requires a lot of effort to tackle.
But there will be no peace and there will be no durable, lasting solution if we do not involve women. They are half of the population. 81% of the households in the IDP camps are headed by a woman. She has to be part of the decision-making about what happens to her in the society she lives in.
The UN says it has also been advocating aggressive implementation of safe schools to avoid another humanitarian crisis in the Northwest.
Why the girl child? Why this rampant kidnapping of school children? I mean, at times I actually lose it when I think about what is happening, especially the numbers, which are mind-blowing from our perspective. But we are advocating, we are reaching out to the government on ways of enhancing safe schools.
As the crisis in the north escalates with no end in sight, timely assistance and protection is imperative.
Well, that same day, the House of Representatives moved to give legal backing to the desire of the Parliament at federal and state levels to invite the President or governors on matters of national interest. It also waded into the dispute between banks and telecommunication operators over a $42 billion debt. We have details on this report.
The controversy generated by the invitation extended to President Muhammadu Buhari by the House in the wake of rising insecurity across the country in December 2020 is still fresh in the minds of many. While the leadership of the House was optimistic the President will honor that invitation, Nigeria's Justice Minister Abubakar Malami came out with just days to the event. He insisted the National Assembly lacked the powers to summon or invite the President. The lawmakers have now moved to carry out necessary alterations to the nation's constitution. The sponsor of the bill based these on the doctrine of separation of powers.
What we are trying to do is to give teeth to the constitution, to give authority to the National Assembly or the State Assembly to be able to summon the governor or the president to the House.
The lawmakers have also resolved to intervene in the dispute between telecommunication operators and banks over a $42 billion debt.
That if the USSD service is withdrawn, Nigerian telecommunication users will fall back and continue with their old traditional models and channels, which is analog.
The telecommunication providers provided the platform for the banks in Nigeria to transact business. The banks are now refusing to pay for the platform at which they transact business. We need to come in to save Nigerians.
Tuesday plenary also received the report of its Committee on House Services, chaired by Wale Raji from Lagos State.
To move that the House do receive the report of the Committee on House Services on the need to investigate the irregularities in the payment of salaries and allowances of legislative aides in the 9th Assembly.
Meanwhile, the Speaker has urged the Nigerian media to continue to uphold the principles of objectivity and professionalism in order to grow the nation's democracy. Femi Gbajabiamila spoke while unveiling the 2021 calendar of the House of Representatives press corps.
We should work as a family. Continue to hold our feet to the fire. That's your job. You must do that. But do it with a little bit of responsibility after investigating, after doing it.
On behalf of the leadership, the Speaker assured members of the Fourth Estate of the realm of the support of the House in their quest to strengthen the nation's fledgling democracy through fair, balanced and professional reporting.
The upward fluctuation in the price.
The Federal Executive Council approved $1.5 billion for the rehabilitation of the largest refining company in the country. That's the Port Harcourt refinery. The project will be done in 3 phases of 18, 24 and 44 months.
Of petroleum products in recent weeks had increased clamors for the rehabilitation of the country's refineries. And now the federal government is taking steps to achieve this, starting with the Port Harcourt refinery. Funding for the project will come from 3 sources: the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation's internally generated revenue, budgetary provisions, and from Afri-Exim Bank.
The Ministry of Petroleum Resources presented a memo on the rehabilitation of Port Harcourt refinery for the sum of $1.5 billion, and it was approved by Council today.
The Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning also presented a memo to Council on the reviewed National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan 2020 to 2043. It allows for the establishment of the National Council on Infrastructure under the chairmanship of the Vice President to provide policy direction and infrastructure-related materials.
There are about 7 asset classes that are contained in the master plan. This is in the areas of transportation, energy, ICT, agriculture, water and mining, social infrastructure, Housing and Regional Development.
Council finally approved a memo from the Ministry of Health, who presented a memo on behalf of NCDC Public Health Laboratory Specialists and for the Center for Disease Control. It involves 6 contracts for the purchase of laboratory equipment to the tune of 3.70 billion naira to strengthen the work of the NCDC in various parts of the country.
It is for 6 contracts for laboratory equipment and to the total worth of 3,70,892,938 various equipment and supplies to strengthen the work of NCDC.
The equipment purchased will establish the NCDC in diagnostics preparedness, not only for COVID-19, but for any other disease outbreak of public interest in the future.
Well, that same Wednesday, chaos broke out at the Senate floor after Minority Leader Ainaya Abaribe sponsored a bill seeking to establish a commission for the armed forces. He said this would deepen federal character in the appointment of service chiefs and other heads of intelligence security agencies, but his bill was countered by a group of senators who claimed it will politicize the military.
It's good on the paper. It's good to create a disunity in the operation of the armed forces. As it's presently composed, the commission cannot take the function of the chief of army staff or the functions of all the chiefs, of all the service chiefs. Because if you allow this bill to materialize, the armed forces will be polarized and the professionalism will be killed.
In the situation what we're going through and what our armed forces are going through, this is probably the worst period after the Biafran War. This is the worst period that has overstretched the unity, the professional competence of our armed forces. And for us now, to now want to introduce this commission at this point in time is going to be very, very diversionary.
Because the power to appoint the chief of defense staff, the chief of army staff, the chief of naval staff, the chief of air force, and other security agencies as may be determined by us. But at least these ones are already determined by the Constitution. That power to make the appointment is already conferred on Mr. President, and that's a constitutional provision.
Any senator may challenge the opinion of the president or the chairman by claiming a division. You have a right to vote. So, Mr. President, I claim a division and I want us to vote one after the other.
That is not my opinion. It's not my opinion that the nays had it. We took a vote. The nays outnumbered or outweighed the ayes. So I think it's not right or it's not correct that the minority leader would impute the defeat of the bill to the President of the Senate.
The tensed atmosphere forced the Senate to withdraw into a closed-door session where Senator Abaribe was asked to withdraw the bill.
Well, Thursday came with an indictment on states by the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, who claimed that governors were not cooperating enough in combating insecurity. The IGP made the accusation at the first quarter meeting of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation with Secretary of State Governments in Abuja.
Security, which was initially limited to a few states in Nigeria, has gradually spread across the country. It has created a climate of uncertainty and challenged the ability of those in authority to provide a friendly atmosphere for its citizens to go about their everyday normal businesses. This first quarter meeting of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation with Secretary of State Governments had most participants joining in virtually. It centered around preferring solutions to the insecurity in the country. The Inspector General of Police, who was also part of the meeting, is not happy with the level of cooperation that have been given his institution by states towards tackling this menace.
And at federal level, we've developed a lot of strategies towards mitigating these issues. But we don't get the maximum cooperation that we're supposed to get from the state, at the state level. And we believe the secretaries to the state governments should be conscious of security in their state.
The issue of security should not be left to only the federal government, but must involve all stakeholders, including state and local governments, every individual and every community.
Governments at all levels have been doing their utmost to address these challenges. However, its persistence calls for approaches that are more than conventional and normal to involve all arms of government, all apparatus of government, and most importantly, those that have relationship directly with the rural communities.
The secretaries to the state's government, on the other hand, point out that there is need for the police to focus more effort on building trust between it and the people.
60% of our communities are not policed. Even where you have, a semblance of presence of police, they are not, well armed. In fact, it's even suicidal to have some police stations where they are currently located based on, the activities of bandits that we have seen.
Present at the meeting were the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, National Security Advisor, Inspector General of Police, Ministers of Environment and Humanitarian Affairs, and the Secretary of State of the 36 states of.
Well, that same day, President Muhammadu Buhari presided over the virtual launch of an $890 million grant to support Nigeria's fight against HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria. The grant provided by Global Fund is to cover the period between 2021 and 2023. The President instructed the Minister of Health to ensure effective utilization of the grant by setting up an accountability framework to monitor the use of the fund and provide periodic performance report to his office.
The thrust of our government in the health sector is to ensure that investments get our health systems strengthened and focus on the most efficient way to utilize available resources and position Nigeria on the path to sustainability of health programs. The Minister of Health is pursuing this trajectory.
Your Excellency, may I, in this same connection, seize the opportunity to also specifically appreciate the outstanding technical and financial support we have received from the United Nations system, the United States government, and other development partners who have resolutely stood by our side in the struggle to reduce the burdens of HIV, TB, and malaria.
In all of our battles against these diseases, we need to acknowledge the important role that people living with them play in the overall success of Nigeria's national disease programs. Civil society organizations, through community-led monitoring, are increasing the capacity of effective communities and organizations to ensure that all partners, sites, donors are held accountable for the quality programming that they need, thereby sharing ownership in success and making these programs more sustainable.
And Friday began with sad news of more killings in Kaduna State. This time, 13 persons were killed and 7 others were injured in a series of attacks across communities in Zagun Kataf, Kauru, and Chikun local government areas of the state. And bandits attacked and killed one Irmia Godwin while his brother escaped as they returned from their farm in Gorogan village in Zagun Kataf. In another incident, the bandits attacked Kizachi village in Kauru local government area and killed 10 persons, leaving 4 others injured. 56 houses and 16 motorcycles were razed with fire, with several barns raided and burnt. Masaka and Kurmi Kaduna villages in Chikun local government area of the state were also attacked, with 2 persons killed and 3 others injured. Well, finally, on Friday, the Sultan of Sokoto, Alhaji Mohammed Saad Abubakar, said no one will be forced to take the COVID-19 vaccine because their roles as religious leaders is to guide and advise. The Sultan made this known during the second phase of a sensitization meeting with Islamic scholars on the COVID-19 vaccination program.
European countries have resumed vaccinations with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine after investigations carried out by the European Medicines Agency concluded that the vaccine was safe and effective for use. Unconfirmed reports had foiled the air over concerns that the jab increased the rate of blood clotting among recipients. The main task, aside the vaccination of health workers and top government officials in Nigeria, is to ensure that citizens support the process. This has formed the background to disengagement with Muslim leaders and scholars to get their support for communities and the grassroots that the vaccines are safe and effective, and to also put to rest the apathy over the choice of vaccine received.
We in Nigeria have not seen any untoward side effect. We have not seen any adverse effect. Yesterday, many of the countries who had halted the use, or rather suspended the use, have resumed, which means the second bill of confidence in this vaccine, its efficacy and its safety.
Bad news travels very fast. So for all of the people who have gotten the information that there was some remote or potential link between AstraZeneca and blood clotting, not everybody will get the information that the European Union, the regulatory body, has now reversed and provided clarity and validated that the use of AstraZeneca is safe.
Because we believe there must be understanding before any action is taken for it to achieve any positive impact on all of us.
Over the last week, there have been several misconceptions about the effectiveness of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine as more countries put its use on hold. But the Nigerian government has insisted on its support to the recent findings on its safety, and Nigeria will retain the ongoing vaccination campaign.
A more lasting layer of prevention is the COVID-19 vaccination. Roll out to enable us achieve herd immunity so that we can have our lives back to normal.
The Sultan of Sokoto, who also doubles as the president of the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, believes that getting the vaccine should be taken out of the free will of the individual and should not be forced on anyone.
It's left for you to want to take the vaccine, because we will not force you, in the sense that when you are hiding in your houses, we will not even come to your house, we won't see you. We only advise you. We only try to appeal to you like we did with the polio vaccine decades ago, and today we are polio free.
Other speakers from an Islamic perspective say that everyone needs to be vaccinated as long as it will cause no harm to the individual.
Taking vaccine is justified in Islam, is permitted, but there are 2 conditions. There should be no harm involved in it, and there should be no haram.
Since the arrival of the first batch of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, there has been widespread apathy and resistance from a cross-section of Nigerians towards getting the vaccine. But the government has given its assurance that the vaccine is safe and effective.
Well, that wraps it up on TVC News at 10. The edition that features flashback, a recap of stories that made headlines during the week.